I'm so glad you're here today. And you're going to be glad you're here too, because you're going to meet a really good friend of mine. Her name is Jenelle Champlin. She's an executive at Comcast. And it was so funny. We got on the phone and we hadn't connected for a while. And she goes, "Oh, by the way, I was just promoted a couple weeks ago." And that is so like Jenelle. She has, I don't know what it is about her, but she is a magnet for opportunities. And this conversation really unlocked some of those keys that have been the catalyst that allowed her to find those opportunities. And part of it was just listening to how she believes in herself, how she opts in for yes without even thinking about, does she have the right experience or the right background? And I kind of pry a little bit to get a little bit of those takeaways, those keys, those insights so that you can have some tangible takeaways. But Janelle is she has positivity, number one. So if you know strengths, you can also think about what that really means is that she leads with positivity. And when people normally see that, they think, oh, she's just like the party person and the happy person, but it really comes from a place of power. She's always reframing things for herself and her team in a way that continues to keep them inspired, engaged, and moving forward. So this is a great conversation. Janelle is a just amazing executive, and I think you're going to really love our conversation. So we just took it as we're catching up kind of conversation, and I hope you enjoy Jenelle Champlin. Welcome, Janelle. I am so just excited to see you. We've been long, fast friends, and I have so much respect for you. And thank you so much for giving your time today.
No, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on your podcast today.
Well, this is just about you and I reconnecting, and we might just have a few people that listen in. So that's how you need to look at it. But I gave a formal introduction to who you are, and you've had an amazing career. But I think it's always good to hear, what has your journey been from thinking about it from your vantage point? What's the real story?
Yeah, no, it's funny. I think we all start our career thinking one thing, and then it's just interesting to see where life takes us. And I think it's just always having an openness and flexibility is what I've learned, to just kind of see where it takes you. I know I started off wanting to go to law school, and now I've been at Comcast for 9+ years as a cable executive. So you just never know. I think you have to definitely be, open to the opportunities. And, when I first started my career, I decided to go in management consulting because it sounded really fun because you could travel. And I love the idea of, people paying for me to travel, and just getting exposed to different types of work because I like to do new things and learn new things. And so, I think that was a great first opportunity or first role for me. I did consulting for almost 10 years. And, I think it grew my skills in a lot of different ways, just foundationally, not only understanding how businesses work, but, basic communication and presentation skills. And it never cut me bored. And I think that's why I was able to do it for so long. It always challenged me with new programs and projects and, different growth opportunities. And I think when the situation came to say, okay, what do you want to do next? And, I'd always like, oh, maybe I'll go back to school. And I ended up doing a lot of work with Comcast. And, I was like, I really love the culture. I really feel like this is some place where I could grow my career. And I think I had made decisions probably in the past where it was all about money or title. And this was, I think, probably one of the smarter decisions I made to say, hey, is this like the right cultural fit for me? Is this going to provide me with the right, growth opportunity longer term in my career? So I think I definitely learned a lot over those first 10 years, not only building my skills, but on also understanding what I wanted, which I think is super important, and really from a company in and of itself, because I think there were probably a lot of different ways I could have gone leveraging my background and my skill set. But for me, it was kind of looking at the the right fit culturally and where I would have opportunity to, continue to grow as a leader from a career perspective.
When I think of, that's really interesting. And it made me think about mindset. And I don't know, maybe it comes from starting those first 10 years in being management consulting, but I feel like knowing you as well as I do, you don't go into a situation looking at the boundaries around it. You give yourself permission to color outside of the lines, if you will. Tell me where that came from. Where did that mindset come from?
It's funny. I do think a lot of it comes from my background in consulting, because I don't think it's necessarily innate, and especially people that have grown up in the same company or an industry where maybe you had a very, set career path or progression. But yeah, I had to pick up and learn a new company and learn a new job. And I was in a situation where we were a lot of times trying to deploy new processes or technology and make things better. And so I would always joke that, people are paying for our opinion. And so when I actually went to Comcast when I first started, I was like, I have to remember, like, people aren't necessarily paying for my opinion anymore. So being a little bit more like tactical about it, but I've never let the constraints of my role or my job, like, I guess, limit the value I could add as like a contributor. So, and I think the role I had as in 10 years of consulting really helped me. Hey, like, how could we do this better? Just like, it's more that growth mindset, I guess you would call it, that it instilled in me at a young age, and it's benefited me, I think, as I've made the transition out of consulting and into other industries. Since
that's so natural to you, and since you're a leader of a broad group, how do you mentor people to make that shift for them?
Yeah, I think, a lot of it is, understanding that. I think part of it too, and we talked about this earlier, is getting over the fear. I think, and I see this more with my female leaders than with my male, but feeling like you have to know everything, feeling like you have to make mistakes, feeling that you might say something and it might be wrong. And I think you just have to get over that fear. And once you get over that fear and build that confidence, and it's not easy, but I think you can do little things, right, to get yourself more comfortable in those situations, like asking a question in a meeting because maybe you don't 100% align, but like asking a question just to understand more and getting that confidence. Because I think the more you do things like that, the more you're confident and the more it'll get you comfortable stepping outside of your comfort zone. So when I mentor people, a lot of times, I'll be like, well, what other, thoughts or opportunities do you see? Or, always look for that. And, don't be afraid to like pitch it, or don't be afraid to like speak up. And usually we'll talk through maybe something specific within their role that they're thinking about, or if there's an area of opportunity to, give them more exposure to present to a leadership group. There's a lot of different ways that I've coached it, but I think it's just kind of getting them out of that mindset that, everything has to be perfect. You have to be a certain level to do X, Y, Z. It's really thinking about the value you bring to the table and how can you continue to showcase that and not be afraid to, showcase that as part of your job. So, yeah,
it just strikes me that just your confidence in what you do, does that wane at all for you? Or do you feel like when you look back on your career, how did you kind of, I hate to use the term fake it till you make it, but does it show up less for you now?
I still question myself all the time. I don't think it ever goes away. I think we all have some level of imposter syndrome, throughout. Even sometimes now, I'm like, was that the right thing to say? I don't know. But I think what you realize is that we're all works in progress.
Yeah.
Everybody's growing. And I think the more you realize, it's kind of like, I kind of think about work as like, when you were young and you used to put your parents on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And then you realize they're human. I think you realize that too, as you move up the ladder, as you continue to work with more senior executives. Like, they're all human. And of course, they're really good at what they do, but they all have areas of opportunity and they all have people that they ask for advice. And so I think it just brings a lot level. And I think COVID did that a lot too. It just brought a level of like humility and like humanness, I guess, to everybody, that I think that makes it easier to be okay with and get over a little bit more, even though you still might have imposter syndrome. I think you realize that everybody probably has a little bit of imposter syndrome or has, their own insecurities you work through. So knowing that, you're like, okay, it's okay, I'm insecure about this, but I'm going to continue to power through it because I know XYZ has this insecurity too, and they're doing this. And so I think it's just knowing where you have those, insecurities and just being conscious of them and, teaching yourself to manage through them because everybody else has them as well.
Yeah, it is so true. And it's funny, we can say that and talk about it, but the practice of it and being like, it's just me.
Yeah.
I'm the only one that feels insecure or not able or not capable
It's
yet.
a lot of times you make it up in your head or, we overanalyze things that we did or said and everyone's like, great job. And I'm like, oh no, but I did this. And I'm like, no, that's my own imposter syndrome coming out. It's not necessarily, what the perception everybody else has of you. It's a lot of times the stories you make up in your head. And I think once you continue to learn to control those narratives, it's a learned practice, the more confident you'll get and you can kind of work through all those, insecurities or, biases you might have against yourself. So
for sure. Like we think everybody lives in here in our head and they don't. Yeah. And that's part of articulating your story and advocating for yourself. We make these assumptions about ourselves and we kind of inhibit the opportunities. So let's talk about opportunities from the outside. When I look at your career and every time I talk to you, I feel like you're like, I just, I'm on to something bigger and better. So how has that happened for you?
It really has. It's going to sound silly, but it has happened organically. And, it hasn't necessarily been me like checking, job boards all the time. It has been about building relationships and conversations. But I think also for having like a really honest conversation with yourself about what you want to do next and what skills you want to grow. And for me, as an example with this past role, I had very kind of much a functional kind of focus of the business. And I wanted to be able to get, broader exposure to other areas. So I started to network with some folks that were in, different functions and finance, which I'd never had exposure to. And, it just turned out that they were looking for somebody with my background to help, manage a portfolio that was very similar. And so I think, I took that move. And it was a lateral move, at the time. But I knew it was something that I wanted to do to continue to grow myself. And so it didn't happen overnight. It was, just conversations and getting to know people and finding areas of the business that I might be interested in. And so I think it's, especially as and you can probably appreciate this too, Susie, the more you move up, the more it is like relationships and, having a lot of conversations, even when you're not looking, just to understand what's out there and building your brand. And so when you're ready to make the move or when you're ready for a new opportunity, you have a network of people or the right opportunity comes up that would be a good fit for you, people think of you. And so it becomes more and more of that and less about, okay, I want to start looking for a new position. Let me just go see what's out on Comcast now or even out in the job boards externally. It is more about, kind of like leveraging your network and, seeing what's out there. And I think the big thing that I've learned is a lot of times when I was first applying for positions, it was a lot about, well, how can I mold myself to be the right candidate for them? And I think I've gotten more in a mindset over the years of how do I know my pitch and my value? And that's what I am representing. And if the company isn't aligned with that or the position, then it's not the right fit for me. So coming in with a different mindset of saying, hey, this has to be the right fit for me, not just the right fit for you. And so I think that's definitely a mindset shift as well when you kind of look for new opportunities is, it's not just saying, oh, I want to be XYZ title, so I'm going to, try to mold myself to be the perfect candidate for this role. It's really, finding what you want to do and making sure it's the right role based on, the value you bring and what you want from a career perspective.
Wow. I just hear so much courage and patience in what you say.
I don't know if my family would say I'm patient, but maybe at work it comes through. Maybe not with my kids though.
Definitely the courage everyone can feel. But like you said, it comes to leverage. I'll bring up the point about leverage is you just said being okay with if you're not the exact right fit, that's okay. That's hard to do.
Yeah. I mean, because we tend to, and I know there's studies on this and we talk about it all the time, especially as women leaders. We look at the qualifications and if we don't meet one, we're
Completely.
And I think sometimes it's changing the narrative of that and thinking about, okay, well, here's kind of traditionally what they look for, but what are the things that I'm really good at that could add value to this role that maybe they haven't even thought about, or a different perspective I could bring than, all of the mainstream candidates that are going to, check these boxes. Like, how can you differentiate yourself and kind of the value you're going to bring to the organization?
Yeah.
I would say it's an evolving process, right? I think about my elevator pitch all the time and, reflect and say, oh, yeah, no, I am good at that. And just continuing to build that like talk track in your mind as well. So,
Yeah. Always appreciate and celebrate what you do well so that you're not looking for your value when you need it, so that
exactly.
you're embodying it all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, and I know, I probably up until a couple of years ago didn't do a great job at that. And I remember going through the Betsy Magnus application, which you helped me with, and helped me get into the program. And it really has you reflect on yourself as a leader and what your strengths are and what you bring. And I think that helped me build the foundation for my talk track that I continue to iterate on and think about. But I think as leaders, a lot of times we don't spend enough time thinking through like, what are our, like, if you had to name 3 like big things that you bring to any role that you have, like, what is it? And it's usually less about like the actual technical skills, or it's more about, what do you bring as a leader? And regardless of what type of team you're leading, you can apply that to a lot of different positions and companies.
Yeah. And what's funny about like those job descriptions or those things, we believe that organization or those groups of people like spent all this time and like really thought about every point, but that they haven't. So it's not like they're looking for this very specific thing, but we think they have this very specific person.
Yeah, we thought they've done like some type of like data science around it, and they know like this is the formula for the perfect candidate. A lot of times they're like, and they're like standard templates that they just throw out there because they want to get the job posted. And then once you actually talk to people, you'll find out what the job is actually about.
Yeah. And to think that we opt ourselves out of those things and to look at that contrast of how we just give ourselves such a disadvantage just automatically. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it is interesting to me too. I think this goes back to why it's important to build relationships, because if you're submitting an application, a lot of times like the matches are automated, right? And so, there's a lot of, I would say, coaching and expertise around, well, how do you make sure that, your resume gets matched in word searches and make sure you have the right words in there? And so I think the more you have those relationships built, the more you don't have to worry as much about that process. You can get your foot in the door, and then you can really have those conversations as well. Because I know it's a little bit different getting your foot in the door nowadays than it was probably like 10, 20 years ago too. And, recruiting was a little bit different as well.
Yeah. I've just gotten done working with a cohort of people in professional development, and it was men and women. It was interesting because networking was one of those things that felt really not comfortable. And it's funny because just by thinking about it as what can I give to the other person and always looking at that, even that little shift for these individuals was like, that was enough to give them permission to lean into it instead of it feeling self-serving.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
and so
I think that's, Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so how has that been just something natural for you? And you've mentioned networking a few times as a part of your consistent approach that has been the differentiator for you. So talk to me more about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think you can feel guilty like reaching out to people and just asking for something. But if you have your network built already, you don't feel as guilty. Like I would not mind coming to you and saying, hey, Susie, I'm looking for XYZ. Do you know anybody, or could you help coach me? Because I've built that relationship. And I think networking is more about getting to know each other and building those relationships, and, you sharing what you can provide and them sharing what they can provide. So then when you need it, you guys are both there for each other. And it's not just like a one-way ask. So, cause I think sometimes they're like, oh, networking, I need to like ask them like, how they can help me and what I want. And it's like, I look at networking more as just like building, relationships and like different levels and different areas that you're interested in, and networking and being smart about networking. Like, obviously building people that you admire or that you see do great things that you want to emulate, or folks that are maybe like on your team or at another level and you want to understand kind of their mindset more so you can be a better leader. I mean, that's how I look at networking is, just building building people around you that make you smarter and better and, help teach you. And, it's not just about like having, X amount of people as, contacts on your LinkedIn profile. It is more about, what do you want to know better? How do you want to grow? What do you want to learn more about to be a better version of yourself?
Yeah. So if I can pull what you just said and put together a technique, if you're in a meeting or you're having a conversation or you see somebody and it crosses your mind, oh, they're really interesting, or I'd like to get to know them, take the action.
Yeah.
Just reach
coffee.
out.
Yeah. You don't have to have a reason. Just say, hey, I enjoyed meeting you. I loved your energy. I'd love to learn more about, creative design, whatever it is in the conversation. And you know what, like a majority of the time, people are like so humbled and honored that you would reach out to them, and they love to talk. People do love to talk about themselves. So, and like what they're passionate about and, what they do. And so I've rarely found anybody that isn't up for a conversation or a coffee, just to get to know somebody better.
And it's so true too. We overthink this, but when it comes to like that next opportunity, people do business and they like to work with people they know, like, and trust.
Yeah.
And that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And when you think about it and distill it down to that, that's not that easy. I mean, that hard to just think about. Like, you just want to be an easy hang, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think people appreciate either. And again, this is something I learned. I think you see really dynamic leaders and that have grown in the company and are so dynamic. And you kind of think that a lot of it's natural. And you realize a lot of it they've learned from others through networking. I mean, a lot of it's through mentorship and things like that as well. But it's like all an army of people that continue to support and help, even people that are uber successful. Nobody does it by themselves. They all, are continuing to learn, continuing to grow, continuing to build their network, right? Based on kind of, where they're at in their, their own lives. So it's just something that I think never goes away and evolves as you, continue to grow in your career.
Yeah. So on this kind of theme of networking, can you think of somebody that was like early on or some story that you can tell us about that there was a tie between this that led to this? That didn't seem like they would be connected. Does anything come to mind for you?
Yeah. I mean, as far as like career opportunities
whatever.
Yeah, no, it's really funny. Actually, I can think of one like way back. And this is when I was consulting and I had made the move. So I was at Accenture and I got offered a lot of money to go to another consulting company. They were starting up a consulting division. And so I was like, sign me up. This is great. The culture was awful. I hated it. It was a year and a half and I ended up leaving, but I had made a really good relationship with one of the HR partners there. And she was actually a recruiter, HR partner. And we just had some really good conversations, both when I had joined the company and for various like roles on my team. And so we connected and continued to build that relationship. And then as I was continuing through my consulting career, she actually reached out to me because they had a strategy role. I wanted to get more into operational strategy, and they had a strategy role that leveraged a lot of my experience and background. And so hadn't talked to her in years, and she reached out to me randomly. It was like, hey, like, how are you doing? Like, I remember you were so good at this and you really had a passion area and we're looking for somebody with this and, kind of more of like a strategy type role, which was exactly what I was looking for. So it's just, you could never know like how those networks and contacts. So it ended up being my last consulting role where I was at that company for 4 years. And that's how I ended up getting my job at Comcast. So
it's crazy.
It just goes to show you never know, and I knew a lot about her too, like as an HR leader. So it could have been the other way around if, like looking at like opportunities and somebody was saying, hey, do you guys know anybody good at HR? Like, I'm like, oh yeah, like I know her. She can, come in and step in. So I think that's one small example of, and it set the course of my career probably completely differently. If I wouldn't have, joined that company and spent the 4 years doing, consulting for that company, I probably wouldn't have been at Comcast and, been there for the next 9 years. So, and it all goes back to kind of the network I built from a young age. So, and we're still connected. And even though
I'm going to ask you that.
Together, we still keep in touch, and, she's gone on to do different things. And as, I've continued to grow my career at Comcast, but, we still continue to have that connection and and that network, which is, what it's all about.
Love it. I love it. All right. So, I'm all about negotiation and you and I have had
Yes.
many conversations about it. So you're my people. So I always want to see how you as a leader look at leverage. How do you view leverage and what do you do with leverage? How do you tell us a little bit about your philosophy?
Yeah. I think a lot of it goes back to understanding your own worth and your own value. So just like we were talking about, like coming to a new position, I think it's knowing what you bring to the table. I think is key, because if you don't know yourself and you're not confident what you're going to bring, you're probably not going to be confident in kind of what you can negotiate or what your leverage really is. And I think it's the same too. I think you have to think about, the other folks in the negotiation as well, because they have a certain amount of leverage. And so I think it's not only understanding your leverage, but understanding their leverage to and this, like as a negotiations expert, I think it's knowing kind of the areas of leverage for both people to understand, the best approach, right? And I always say, I learned this in business school, anchor high.
Anchor high. There you go. Mic drop.
But I really do think it's about, because I think a lot of times we tend to look at our own leverage, which I think is important. We need to know what we bring to the table or what kind of skin we have in the game. But I also think it's important to look at others' leverage too, to figure out like how you want to approach the negotiation. Because if folks don't have a lot of leverage on the other side, that's going to make you way more confident to come in maybe a little bit differently than if this other person maybe has a little bit more leverage. Then, you might want to come in and more of like still maybe like more for you or higher, but like you want to come up probably with a more compromising position than you probably would if that other person didn't.
Yeah. I love that so much. Obviously you're singing my language, but I also just what you said too about when and embody your value, you can use that leverage in the right moment when you need to. And that allows you to advocate for yourself. There's so much power in that. And just understanding that, embodying that. That is so great.
Yeah. And I think the more you do that, I think to your point, you don't have to plan for it. You're confident in your skills and your abilities. And if somebody wants to negotiate something that goes against that or isn't necessarily utilizing that or, respecting that, then you can quickly, negotiate to something that, you feel good about, which is important.
Totally. Oh my gosh. Janelle, you embody that for sure, of just understanding your leverage and knowing and being your own advocate. So thank you for being here, but also being that you're already living your legacy and you're handing that off to people that are around you and work for you. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. You are definitely in my circle, one of my great mentors as well. So
thank you.
I'm so proud of you and everything that you've done and appreciate our relationship and our, networking and our, mentorship of each other. So.
So great. Thanks again. And this is a great discussion. Make sure you rewind and listen again. There were so many great tools in gold that you've given us, Janelle. So thanks for being here.
Thanks, Susie.